Hello, parents, and welcome back to Parent Shift, a place where we speak about conscious parenting. I'm continuing the theme of parenting myths that are raising broken adults. This is the part 5 of the series, and today we will speak about pedestal and glorifying parents. Basically, parents for whom their children are always larger than life and doing things which are extraordinary, much better than others. But before I jump into the theme, like I say every time, let's grab a pen and paper. This is a serious conversation. You need to take some notes. And here is a reflection question for you, which I will address throughout the video and I will summarize at the end of it. The question for you is, are you raising a child who believes they are loved or who believe that they are flawless? I'll repeat that question for you. Are you raising a child who believes that they are loved or a child who believes they are flawless? Now, let's go back to some habitual conversations of pedestal and glorifying parents. You will hear them say, and maybe you've also said this, I've also said this at times when we say, oh, my child is doing at 2 years of age what others could not do at 5 or 6 or 7, or at 3 years or 4 years, my child was doing so and so, and none of his or her peer groups were doing anything. When I look at my child at 5 years, he or she is so much more wiser than adults around us. At 10 years, my child has such a beautiful command over language and this, and what confidence the child shows, and etc., etc., etc. And different situations, the quote always comes back to the child. And when you actually look at these children, there is nothing extraordinary about them. They are pretty much doing what all the other children in their peer group are doing. So that's the big contrast. There is something in the parent's nature. There is something in the way that the parent is glorifying this child that is completely out of line, and it's showing up. When you look at some of these children, they could be overweight, yet their parents are glorifying them for grace and so many other such qualities. Or when you look at them, their speech is outright rude or crass, but the parents are calling it out that the child is very brave and courageous and calls things out or advises. Or you will see that the child is making out of place one-liners and speaking in things where he or she has no business, basically intruding in others and adult conversations. Yet instead of redirecting that energy and that conversation, the parents are glorifying. That's where the problem of the pedestal and the glorifying parent is. That there is no reality check that they are offering. It's wonderful to praise children. It's wonderful to encourage children. Problem solving, puzzles, games, language, expression. When they participate in conversations, when they speak on certain topics, when they ask questions, it's wonderful to encourage children. But what we also have to do is offer a reality check, because what they are saying could be wonderful, but the time, the place, the mannerism may not be correct. The interjections that they are making, they may not have a context to what they are saying, and it's out of sheer innocence or having read things somewhere that they are saying this. So it's the overall assessment, reality check that is missing. In fact, let's understand that reality check is an approach that parents induce or they suppress in the child very early. When you are someone who is a control-oriented parent, I have spoken about this earlier, too much of control, you're not allowing the child independence at all. And similarly, on the other side, when you are glorifying the child so much and when you are putting the child up on a pedestal, again, you will do the same thing. You're completely suppressing their reality check because the interaction that they have with the world is flawed. In the control parent, it is through the controlled parent's lens, the drips that they let out. And in this case, it is through completely unfiltered and completely unassessed praise that the parent themselves is showering on the child. I say this again and again, that we all parent through our own scripts and life decisions, or the lack of it, the way we have been brought up and then the way we decided things for ourselves very early on in life. And in this case, where the parent is giving out such ungrounded vibes, it's creating a bubble for the child. It is creating a lot of indulgence for this child. There is too much of sweet talk. There is little correction. We really have to wonder what the parent's script is and what the challenge was. So go back and look at your own lives, and if you are one of these parents who is doing too much of pedestaling, who's too much glorifying, what happened with your life? Was it that you were also brought up like this and there was so much of lavish praise and attention which was given? And this could happen, like culturally, in many countries, even today, when a boy child comes up, it's suddenly that the mother's stature goes up, the father's stature goes up, the family's stature goes up, the child is hero worshipped. Could be. Also could be in certain families where the mother or the father or several of the parental figures, they have decided that the coming of a girl child into the family is going to be a glorious blessing, and hence then you are lavishing everything on that child. So there could be some scripts in our families and our communities which have been running like this, from where this glorifying and this parenting, the pedestal parenting could be coming. It could also be the other way around, that as parents or parental figures, we may have had extreme deficit of positive strokes, extreme deficit of praise, because of which we are tantamounting to this. I've also seen another very distinctive change where very strict parents, when they become grandparents, they suddenly start becoming lavishing. They become very glorifying in pedestal parenting. So there is some switch that possibly has happened there also. Was it guilt? Was it exhaustion? We don't know. We'll need to figure out case by case basis, but these are some elements of evidence. And there are deeper patterns that I've had a lot of conversations with people about, but it's for each individual to figure out what's the meandering that they went through out of some of these things that I called out for you. So, checking the child and giving a reality check is not bad. In fact, we don't disturb a child's self-worth or its self-concept by correcting and redirecting the child. We could do it by a lot of controlling, but definitely not by corrections and redirecting here and there. In fact, when we provide reality check to the child, when we give the child the direction, we are setting appropriate boundaries. In fact, we are teaching these children to grow up with boundaries, and a reality check which becomes very good quality later on in life. Otherwise, an adult who doesn't have reality check can completely go overboard on things, from the way they talk, to the way they behave, to the way they treat law, to the way they drive, etc. So it's important that we introduce these concepts very early. In fact, like I said, good amount of reality check is very essential to bring a sense of self-worth and also to drive the child towards real lasting excellence. Because as the child grows up, it is going to get the sense of the real competitive worth that it has against other teens, etc. by the time it's about 14, 15 years. And at that time, if the child is unrealistic in the approach, or if in young adulthood, which is around the 20, 22 years of age, it discovers that the reality check that it is now receiving is so much different from the lavishing, the pedestal that it was given by its parental figures, then it can be very devastating for the self-worth of the child. So be cautious with what you're doing. Remember, your child can be gifted, yet it can be grainy. So you may still have to do a lot of work on the child. You will need to take the sandpaper to the child. You will need to take the chiseling to the child to ensure that a whole host of that graininess goes away. In fact, like Howard Gardner says, there are 7 primary intelligences. So the extension of all of those intelligences are there for you to look at and balance your child into a multifaceted child. So your child can be gifted, yet it can be grainy. That reality assessment is something that you have to provide as a child. Now, when you acknowledge the child, when you praise the child, when you glorify the child a little bit, yes, it gives a lot of confidence in the early years. So it may have its little positives here and there. Even the parent tends to feel good because your ego gets boosted that, look, it's boosted that it's my child and it's having so much of achievements. And the child also tends to get a little bit of extrinsic motivation. But the downside of this kind of parenting without boundaries, without control, etc., is that it will grow up to resist feedback. In fact, it will grow up to challenge the world and say that, look, I think this is who I am. How can you say that I am not enough? How can you say that I am not gifted? And the child will start learning shortcuts. In fact, in today's generation, there are a lot of people who have mastered shortcuts to appear larger than life and better than they are. They really don't have an understanding of trade and trade skills. You will see this in people who are putting out digitally mastered music, or those who are putting out art with the help of other tools that they have perfected it with, or who are posing as great photographers by photoshopping, or who are today attempting exams and they are taking the support of AI and such things. In the olden times, there were also people who used to try and cheat and get through exams. So a lot of these are examples of where the parent did not give the right reality check, and along with that, yes, values, morals, anchoring, etc. So be cautious what you're doing. Do not raise an exploiter, a manipulator by doing this. Do not raise a child with an inflated ego, possibly even with narcissistic tendencies. Don't do it. Be very careful. And this caution goes out a lot more to today's families, where we have double income parents who have a lot of disposable income, using which they can prop up their child, using which they can display that the child is much better than what it is. In fact, those families which have generational wealth also need to be very cautious of this and see where this is. So yes, those parents who have somewhere made the decision to lavish on their child, put them on a pedestal, those parents who have a lot of disposable income and they're spending it on their child like this, or generational wealth, they all need to be very cautious. Even some very traditional families where the object of love, object of affection, object of attention becomes the child, the boy child, the male, female child, or the first child or the last child. We have to be very cautious with these concepts. On a lighter side, I would say this: if you as a parent enjoy it so much that you like to boost ego, why don't you become a motivational speaker? It's a wonderful thing to do. But remember the motivational speaker meme that many of us have seen, where that little rat is going and pulling the whiskers of the lion. What happens when that lion wakes up? And mostly that meme read this, that that the rat must have listened to some motivational speakers. So remember, even motivational speeches have to be realistically oriented. If you're really doing good to others, show them the right path of doing things. So don't just boost the ego of the child, show the child foundational values. Now, when we are in that zone of pedestal or the lavishing parent that we become, there are several myths that could come up, but there are two prominent ones which are very common, and I would like to bring to your attention these myths. The first myth is that my child is gifted at everything. I just need the world to see it. And yes, every child has its uniqueness. Every child comes with some gifts. However, the question is, what are you benchmarking this against? Because ultimately, most of these skills have to be displayed in a world where there are other children, other adults also who are gifted. The lineage is there. In most of the things, there is a lineage. So what are you comparing? What standard are you looking at? Now, comparison to some extent is good because it also gives us validation on a real life scale on where things stand. So if a parent is not going to see which standard, like on music, which particular school, which exam, which grade levels are they, or in academics, against what competition, what competitive exam are you looking at this? When it comes to the knowledge, against what benchmarking system, or if it's about some sense of creativity or some special skills around robotics or aviation or anything that the child is displaying, some interest, some hobby that the child has, against what standard are we comparing? So it is important to subject the child also to some competitive environment. So instead of claiming that my child is gifted at everything and I just need the world to see it, it's important to get the child to perform on platforms where the child can get that validation. So don't stay in that myth that my child is gifted. Yes, the child can have gifts, but the gifts need to be shown on a platform where the child gets assessed against others, against people, and gets a realistic feedback. So that's the first myth that we need to deal with. The second myth that very commonly happens is the child is too mature or confident. They are very clear. They don't need to be corrected. They are special. Don't think that they are naughty or they are outspoken. They are talented. They're truly talented. And these kind of parents insist that, even at a very young age, we will like to take the advice of the child, etc. See, let's understand, in a family, is it important to give voice to the child? Yes, it is. There is an age, there is a time, there is a place, and there are subjects on which you should hear the child out. Like when it relates to them, when it relates to their relationship with the parents and the environment around the house that you live in, the things that the child does, etc. But does the child have to have a say in all matters? Does the child needs to eavesdrop into every conversation and then, drop a statement or a pearl of wisdom? No, it doesn't need to. The child doesn't have to have a say in everything, just like the parent doesn't need to have a say in everything. So boundaries are very important. Where are we speaking? When are we speaking? When we need to have self-regulation? These are very important. So if you bring up your child under this myth that your child doesn't need to be corrected, then you are teaching the child to grow up without boundaries, without self-regulation. And that can become a significant intrusion by the child into the life of other people as the child grows up. So again, do not subject the child to this kind of a myth. It can bring a very broken adult into the life of a lot of other people, and you may not be there to witness that damage that happens. So be cautious of these myths and take a better approach. And let's now talk about how do you really balance this kind of parenting style. So again, there are some very common things that I keep saying in parenting, like the first one here, I've said it many times. We need to have very clear values in the family, and especially with a pedestal parent, we need to ensure, or a glorifying parent, we need to ensure that the value of excellence, the value of standards is very clear. What does it mean to come up against a certain standard? What does it mean to compete in real life? What does true excellence mean? What does true mastery mean? At what level does a skill really become worth glory? These are some values that need to be really spoken, and obviously assessments which are behaviors which are related to this kind of a value assessment. The second thing that we should do in family, and this is very good for a child to come up, the child has to have a process of assessment and self-improvement. So periodic benchmarking, how much has the child learned? What is the rate of learning of the child? How well, how deep is the improvement? Especially depth that the child is acquiring and breadth that the child is acquiring, both need to be assessed. It may not just be variety. In today's time, there is a lot of weightage that has been placed on variety and novelty of information that children have. Most of the times it's just language, it's just English or whatever language that they speak. They just know the name of that. Like the great scientist Richard Feynman would say this, that his father taught him at a very early age that there is nothing in knowing the name of birds in different languages. You actually have to know the bird. So in that same sense, your child really has to know their subjects at a deep level, at a breadth level, instead of just having novelty and variety of different things that the child knows. So bring it into a process of assessment and self-improvement. When you praise, and praise you must, your praise should be grounded. Your praise should also be factual about what the child is doing right, and the praise needs to also have reflection to help the child identify that here is what you did right, how can you do more of it? And here are the other areas of improvement, how can you get that done? Playing on strengths alone can quickly get the child into a zone of derailers. There is a philosophy which says don't work on your weaknesses, but that philosophy, especially this Western philosophy, doesn't really work. The Eastern philosophy is much better, much useful, which is protect your strengths, don't over leverage them, but overcome your weaknesses. It's an important thing to do. Then the parent needs to model humility and And while doing that, the parent also needs to handle praise well and share the same and teach the same, role model the same for the child. Bring humility, handle praise well. And whenever there is a mistake that is made, whether the parent makes the mistake or the child makes the mistake, the environment at home should be that yes, the mistake has been made, but we have the confidence that we have the strength to rise up to the occasion, correct the mistake and go forward and not repeat those mistakes. So those things will help. So clarify value, bring a process of improvement, assessment and realism, grounded praise, building humility while taking praises, and then whenever mistake happens, show the confidence that you can correct it. So that brings us to the question that we started with. Are you raising a child who knows that they are loved, or are you raising a child who thinks he or she is flawless? You would have now been able to reflect and got the answer. So please do not raise a child who thinks that it is flawless. Every day there is opportunity to get better. Fight for excellence. Every day we can be better than who we were, and that's ultimately what really matters. That's the biggest wealth that we can assimilate. So at home, create an environment where you and the children pause, reflect, you simplify things, you help them lead the way into reality and no nonsense image of this world. Don't have a more positive or more negative image than what it really is. Love your child. Don't indulge the child in